CostasNarrativeXP presents The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie. Chapter 11. Poirot Pays a Call. I was slightly nervous when I rang the bell at Marby Grange the following afternoon. I wondered very much what Poirot expected to find out. He had entrusted the job to me. Why? Was it because, as in the case of questioning Major Blunt, he wished to remain in the background? The wish, intelligible in the first case, seemed to me quite meaningless here. My meditations were interrupted by the advent of a smart parlour-maid. Yes, Mrs. Folliot was at home. I was ushered into a big drawing-room, and looked round me curiously as I waited for the mistress of the house. A large bare room, some good bits of old china, and some beautiful etchings, shabby covers and curtains. A lady's room in every sense of the term. I turned from the inspection of a Bartolozzi on the wall as Mrs. Folliot came into the room. She was a tall woman with untidy brown hair and a very winning smile. "Dr. Sheppard," she said hesitatingly. "That is my name," I replied. "I must apologize for calling upon you like this, but I wanted some information about a parlour-maid previously employed by you, Ursula Bourne." With the utterance of the name, the smile vanished from her face, and all the cordiality froze out of her manner. She looked uncomfortable and ill at ease. "Ursula Bourne?" she said hesitatingly. "Yes," I said. "Perhaps you don't remember the name?" "Oh, yes, of course. I remember perfectly." "She left you just over a year ago, I understand." Yes, she did. That is quite right." "And you were satisfied with her while she was with you? How long was she with you, by the way?" "Oh, a year or two. I can't remember exactly how long. She is very capable. I'm sure you will find her quite satisfactory. I didn't know she was leaving Fernly. I hadn't the least idea of it." "Can you tell me anything about her?" I asked. "Anything about her?" "Yes, where she comes from, who her people are, that sort of thing." Mrs. Folliot's face wore more than ever its frozen look. "I don't know at all." "Who was she with before she came to you?" "I'm afraid I don't remember." There was a spark of anger now underlying her nervousness. She flung up her head in a gesture that was vaguely familiar. "Is it really necessary to ask all these questions?" "Not at all," I said, with an air of surprise and a tinge of apology in my manner. "I had no idea you would mind answering them. I'm very sorry." Her anger left her, and she became confused again. "Oh, I don't mind answering them. I assure you I don't. Why should I? It just seemed a little odd, you know. That's all. A little odd." One advantage of being a medical practitioner is that you can usually tell when people are lying to you. I should have known from Mrs. Folliot's manner, if from nothing else, that she did mind answering my questions. Minded intensely. She was thoroughly uncomfortable and upset, and there was plainly some mystery in the background. I judged her to be a woman quite unused to deception of any kind, and consequently rendered acutely uneasy when forced to practice it. A child could have seen through her. But it was also clear that she had no intention of telling me anything further. Whatever the mystery centering around Ursula Bourne might be, I was not going to learn it through Mrs. Folliot. Defeated, I apologized once more for disturbing her, took my hat, and departed. I went to see a couple of patients and arrived home about 6 o'clock. Caroline was sitting beside the rack of tea things. She had that look of suppressed exultation on her face which I know only too well. It is a sure sign with her of either the getting or the giving of information. I wondered which it had been. "I've had a very interesting afternoon," began Caroline as I dropped into my own particular easy chair and stretched out my feet to the inviting blaze in the fireplace. "Have you?" I asked. "Miss Gannett drop in to tea?" Miss Gannett is one of the chief of our newsmongers. Guess again. said Caroline with intense complacency. I guessed several times, working slowly through all the members of Caroline's intelligence corps. My sister received each guess with a triumphant shake of the head. In the end, she volunteered the information herself. "Monsieur Poirot," she said. "Now, what do you think of that?" I thought a good many things of it, but I was careful not to say them to Caroline. "Why did he come?" I asked. "To see me, of course. She said that knowing my brother so well, he hoped he might be permitted to make the acquaintance of his charming sister. Your charming sister. I've got mixed up, but you know what I mean." "What did he talk about?" I asked. "He told me a lot about himself and his cases. You know that Prince Paul of Mauritania, the one who's just married a dancer?" "Yes. I saw a most intriguing paragraph about her in society snippets the other day, hinting that she was really a Russian Grand Duchess, one of the Tsar's daughters, who managed to escape from the Bolsheviks. Well, it seems that Monsieur Poirot solved a baffling murder mystery that threatened to involve them both. Prince Paul was beside himself with gratitude." "Did he give him an emerald tie pin the size of a plover's egg?" I inquired sarcastically. "He didn't mention it. Why?" "Nothing," I said. "I thought it was always done. It is in detective fiction anyway. The super detective always has his rooms littered with rubies and pearls and emeralds from grateful royal clients." "It's very interesting to hear about these things from the inside," said my sister complacently. It would be, to Caroline. I could not but admire the ingenuity of Mr. Hercule Poirot, who had selected unerringly the case of all others that would most appeal to an elderly maiden lady living in a small village. "Did he tell you if the dancer was really a Grand Duchess?" I inquired. "He was not at liberty to speak," said Caroline importantly. I wondered how far Poirot had strained the truth in talking to Caroline. Probably not at all. He had conveyed his innuendos by means of his eyebrows and his shoulders. "And after all this," I remarked, "I suppose you were ready to eat out of his hand." "Don't be coarse, James. I don't know where you get these vulgar expressions from." "Probably from my only link with the outside world, my patients. Unfortunately, my practice does not lie amongst royal princes and interesting Russian émigrés." Caroline pushed her spectacles up and looked at me. "You seem very grumpy, James. It must be your liver. A blue pill, I think, tonight." To see me in my own home, you would never imagine that I was a doctor of medicine. Caroline does the home prescribing both for herself and me. "Damn my liver," I said irritably. "Did you talk about the murder at all?" "Well, naturally, James. What else is there to talk about locally? I was able to set Monsieur Poirot right upon several points. He was very grateful to me. He said I had the makings of a born detective in me, and a wonderful psychological insight into human nature." Caroline was exactly like a cat that is full to overflowing with rich cream. She was positively purring. "He talked a lot about the little grey cells of the brain, and of their functions. His own, he says, are of the first quality." "He would say so," I remarked bitterly. "Modesty is certainly not his middle name." "I wish you would not be so horribly American, James. He thought it very important that Ralph should be found as soon as possible, and induced to come forward and give an account of himself. He says that his disappearance will produce a very unfortunate impression at the inquest." "And what did you say to that?" "I agree with him," said Caroline importantly, "and I was able to tell him the way people were already talking about it." "Caroline," I said sharply, "did you tell Monsieur Poirot what you overheard in the wood that day?" "I did," said Caroline complacently. I got up and began to walk about. "You realize what you're doing, I hope," I jerked out. "You're putting a halter round Ralph Peyton's neck as surely as you're sitting in that chair." "Not at all," said Caroline, quite unruffled. "I was surprised you hadn't told him." "I took very good care not to," I said. "I'm fond of that boy." "So am I. That's why I say you're talking nonsense. I don't believe Ralph did it, and so the truth can't hurt him, and we ought to give Monsieur Poirot all the help we can. Why, think, very likely Ralph was out with that identical girl on the night of the murder, and if so, he's got a perfect alibi." "If he's got a perfect alibi," I retorted, Why doesn't he come forward and say so?" "Might get the girl into trouble," said Caroline sapiently. "But if Monsieur Poirot gets hold of her and puts it to her as her duty, she'll come forward of her own accord and clear Ralph." "You seem to have invented a romantic fairy story of your own," I said. "You read too many trashy novels, Caroline. I've always told you so." I dropped into my chair again. "Did Poirot ask you any more questions?" I inquired. "Only about the patients you had that morning." "The patients?" I demanded, unbelievingly. "Yes, your surgery patients. How many and who they were." "Do you mean to say you were able to tell him that?" I demanded. Caroline is really amazing. "Why not?" asked my sister triumphantly. "I can see the path up to the surgery door perfectly from this window, and I've got an excellent memory, James. Much better than yours, let me tell you." "I'm sure you have," I murmured mechanically. My sister went on, checking the names on her fingers. There was old Mrs. Bennet, and that boy from the farm with the bad finger, Dolly Grice to have a needle out of her finger, that American steward of the liner. Let me see, that's 4. Yes, and old George Evans with his ulcer, and lastly, she paused significantly. "Well?" Caroline brought out her climax triumphantly. She hissed in the most approved style, aided by the fortunate number of S's at her disposal. "Miss Russell." She sat back in her chair and looked at me meaningly. And when Caroline looks at you meaningly, it is impossible to miss it. "I don't know what you mean," I said, quite untruthfully. "Why shouldn't Miss Russell consult me about her bad knee?" "Bad knee," said Caroline. "Fiddlesticks. No more bad knee than you and I. She was after something else." "What?" I asked. Caroline had to admit that she didn't know. "But depend upon it, that was what he was trying to get at, Monsieur Poirot, I mean. There's something fishy about that woman, and he knows it." "Precisely the remark Mrs. Ackroyd made to me yesterday," I said, "that there was something fishy about Miss Russell." "Ah," said Caroline darkly, "Mrs. Ackroyd. There's another." "Another what?" Caroline refused to explain her remarks. She merely nodded her head several times, rolled up her knitting, and went upstairs to don the high mauve silk blouse and the gold locket which she calls dressing for dinner. I stayed there staring into the fire and thinking over Caroline's words. Had Poirot really come to gain information about Miss Russell, or was it only Caroline's tortuous mind that interpreted everything according to her own ideas? There had certainly been nothing in Miss Russell's manner that morning to arouse suspicion, at least. I remembered her persistent conversation on the subject of drug-taking, and from that she had led the conversation to poisons and poisoning. But there was nothing in that. Ackroyd had not been poisoned. Still, it was odd. I heard Caroline's voice, rather exit in note, calling from the top of the stairs. "James, you will be late for dinner." I put some coal on the fire and went upstairs obediently. It is well at any price to have peace in the home. Chapter 12. Round the Table. A joint inquest was held on Monday. I do not propose to give the proceedings in detail. To do so would only be to go over the same ground again and again. By arrangement with the police, very little was allowed to come out. I gave evidence as to the cause of Ackroyd's death and the probable time. The absence of Ralph Peyton was commented on by the coroner, but not unduly stressed. Afterwards, Poirot and I had a few words with Inspector Raglan. The inspector was very grave. "It looks bad to Mr. Poirot," he said. "I'm trying to judge the thing fair and square. I'm a local man, and I've seen Captain Peyton many times in Cranchester. I'm not wanting him to be the guilty one, but it's bad whichever way you look at it. If he's innocent, why doesn't he come forward? We've got evidence against him, but it's possible that that evidence could be explained away. Then why doesn't he give an explanation?" A lot more lay behind the inspector's words than I knew at the time. Ralph's description had been wired to every port and railway station in England. The police everywhere were on the alert. His rooms in town were watched, and any houses he had been known to be in the habit of frequenting. With such a cordon, it seemed impossible that Ralph should be able to evade detection. He had no luggage, and, as far as anyone knew, no money. I can't find anyone who saw him at the station that night, continued the inspector, and yet he's well known down here, and you'd think somebody would have noticed him. There's no news from Liverpool either. You think he went to Liverpool? Queried Poirot. Well, it's on the cards. That telephone message from the station, just 3 minutes before the Liverpool express left. There ought to be something in that. Unless it was deliberately intended to throw you off the scent, that might just possibly be the point of the telephone message. That's an idea, said the inspector eagerly. Do you really think that's the explanation of the telephone call? My friend, said Poirot gravely, I do not know, but I will tell you this. I believe that when we find the explanation of that telephone call, we shall find the explanation of the murder. You said something like that before, I remember, I observed, looking at him curiously. Poirot nodded. I always come back to it, he said seriously. It seems to me utterly irrelevant, I declared. I wouldn't say that, demurred the inspector, but I must confess I think Mr. Poirot here harps on it a little too much. We've better clues than that. The fingerprints on the dagger, for instance. Poirot became suddenly very foreign in manner, as he often did when excited over anything. Monsieur l'Inspecteur, he said, beware of the blind. The blind, comment dire, the little street that has no end to it. Inspector Ragland stared, but I was quicker. You mean a blind alley? I said. That is it, the blind street that leads nowhere. So it may be with those fingerprints. They may lead you nowhere. I don't see how that can well be, said the police officer. I suppose you're hinting that they're faked. I've read of such things being done, though I can't say I've ever come across it in my experience. But fake or true, they're bound to lead somewhere. Poirot merely shrugged his shoulders, flinging out his arms wide. The inspector then showed us various enlarged photographs of the fingerprints, and proceeded to become technical on the subject of loops and whorls. Come now, he said at last, annoyed by Poirot's detached manner. You've got to admit that those prints were made by someone who was in the house that night. Bien entendu, said Poirot, nodding his head. Well, I've taken the prints of every member of the household, everyone, mind you, from the old lady down to the kitchen maid. I don't think Mrs. Ackroyd would enjoy being referred to as the old lady. She must spend a considerable amount on cosmetics. Everyone's, repeated the inspector fussily. Including mine, I said dryly. Very well, none of them correspond. That leaves us two alternatives. Ralph Peyton, or the mysterious stranger the doctor here tells us about. When we get hold of those two... Much valuable time may have been lost, broke in Poirot. I don't quite get you, Mr. Poirot. You have taken the prints of everyone in the house, you say, murmured Poirot. Is that the exact truth you are telling me there, Monsieur l'Inspecteur? Certainly. Without overlooking anyone? Without looking anyone. The quick or the dead? For a moment the inspector looked bewildered at what he took to be a religious observation. Then he reacted slowly. You mean the dead, Monsieur l'Inspecteur? The inspector still took a minute or two to understand. I am suggesting, said Poirot placidly, that the fingerprints on the dagger handle are those of Mr. Ackroyd himself. It is an easy matter to verify. His body is still available. But why? What would be the point of it? You're surely not suggesting suicide, Mr. Poirot. Ah, no. My theory is that the murderer wore gloves or wrapped something round his hand. After the blow was struck, he picked up the victim's hand and closed it round the dagger handle. But why? Poirot shrugged his shoulders again. To make a confusing case even more confusing. Well, said the inspector, I'll look into it. What gave you the idea in the first place? When you were so kind as to show me the dagger and draw attention to the fingerprints. I know very little of loops and whorls. See, I confess my ignorance frankly. But it did occur to me that the position of the prints was somewhat awkward. Not so would I have held a dagger in order to strike. Naturally, with the right hand brought up over the shoulder backwards, it would have been difficult to put it in exactly the right position. Inspector Ragland stared at the little man. Poirot, with an air of great unconcern, flecked a speck of dust from his coat sleeve. Well, said the inspector, it's an idea. I'll look into it all right. but don't you be disappointed if nothing comes of it." He endeavored to make his tone kindly and patronizing. Poirot watched him go off. Then he turned to me with twinkling eyes. "Another time," he observed, "I must be more careful of his amour-propre. And now that we are left to our own devices, what do you think, my good friend, of a little reunion of the family?" The little reunion, as Poirot called it, took place about half an hour later. We sat round a table in the dining-room at Fernley. Poirot at the head of the table, like the chairman of some ghastly board meeting. The servants were not present, so we were 6 in all: Mrs. Ackroyd, Flora, Major Blunt, young Raymond, Poirot, and myself. When everyone was assembled, Poirot rose and bowed. "Messieurs, mesdames, I have called you together for a certain purpose." He paused. "To begin with, I want to make a very special plea to mademoiselle." "To me?" said Flora. "Mademoiselle, you are engaged to Captain Ralph Peyton. If anyone is in his confidence, you are. I beg you, most earnestly, if you know of his whereabouts, to persuade him to come forward. One little minute." As Flora raised her head to speak, "Say nothing till you have well reflected. Mademoiselle, his position grows daily more dangerous. If he had come forward at once, no matter how damning the facts, he might have had a chance of explaining them away. But this silence, this flight, what can it mean? Surely only one thing: knowledge of guilt. Mademoiselle, if you really believe in his innocence, persuade him to come forward before it is too late." Laura's face had gone very white. "Too late," she repeated, very low. Poirot leaned forward, looking at her. "See now, mademoiselle," he said very gently, "it is Papa Poirot who asks you this. The old Papa Poirot, who has much knowledge and much experience. I would not seek to entrap you, mademoiselle. Will you not trust me, and tell me where Ralph Peyton is hiding?" The girl rose and stood facing him. "Monsieur Poirot," she said in a clear voice, "I swear to you, swear solemnly, that I have no idea where Ralph is, and that I have neither seen him nor heard from him either on the day of the murder or since." She sat down again. Poirot gazed at her in silence for a minute or two. Then he brought his hand down on the table with a sharp rap. "Bien, that is that," he said. His face hardened. "Now I appeal to these others who sit round this table: Mrs. Ackroyd, Major Blunt, Dr. Sheppard, Mr. Raymond. You are all friends and intimates of the missing man. If you know where Ralph Peyton is hiding, speak out." There was a long silence. Poirot looked to each in turn. "I beg of you," he said in a low voice, "speak out." But still there was silence, broken at last by Mrs. Ackroyd. "I must say," she observed in a plaintive voice, "that Ralph's absence is most peculiar indeed. Not to come forward at such a time. It looks, you know, as though there was something behind it. I can't help thinking, Flora dear, that it was a very fortunate thing your engagement was never formally announced." "Mother!" cried Flora angrily. "Providence," declared Mrs. Ackroyd. "I have a devout belief in Providence, a divinity that shapes our ends, as Shakespeare's beautiful line runs." "Surely you don't make the Almighty directly responsible for thick ankles, Mrs. Ackroyd, do you?" asked Geoffrey Raymond, his irresponsible laugh ringing out. His idea was, I think, to loosen the tension, but Mrs. Ackroyd threw him a glance of reproach and took out her handkerchief. "Flora has been saved a terrible amount of notoriety and unpleasantness. Not for a moment that I think dear Ralph had anything to do with poor Roger's death. I don't think so. But then I have a trusting heart. I always have had, ever since a child. I am loath to believe the worst of anyone. But, of course, one must remember that Ralph was in several air raids as a young boy. The results are apparent long after. Sometimes, they say, people are not responsible for their actions in the least. They lose control, you know, without being able to help it." "Mother!" cried Flora. "You don't think Ralph did it?" "Come, Mrs. Ackroyd," said Blunt. "I don't know what to think," said Mrs. Ackroyd tearfully. "It is all very upsetting. What would happen to the estate, I wonder, if Ralph were found guilty?" Raymond pushed his chair away from the table violently. Major Blunt remained very quiet, looking thoughtfully at her. "Like shell-shock, you know," said Mrs. Ackroyd obstinately. "And I dare say Roger kept him very short of money, with the best intentions, of course. I can see you are all against me, but I do think it is very odd that Ralph has not come forward, and I must say I am thankful Flora's engagement was never announced formally." "It will be tomorrow," said Flora in a clear voice. "Flora!" cried her mother, aghast. Flora had turned to the secretary. "Will you send the announcement to the Morning Post and the Times, please, Mr. Raymond?" "If you are sure that it is wise, Miss Ackroyd," he replied gravely. She turned impulsively to Blunt. "You understand," she said. "What else can I do? As things are, I must stand by Ralph. Don't you see that I must?" She looked very searchingly at him, and after a long pause he nodded abruptly. Mrs. Ackroyd burst out into shrill protests. Flora remained unmoved. Then Raymond spoke. "I appreciate your motives, Miss Ackroyd, but don't you think you are being rather precipitate? Wait a day or two." "Tomorrow," said Flora in a clear voice. "It's no good, mother, going on like this. Whatever else I am, I'm not disloyal to my friends." "Monsieur Poirot," Mrs. Ackroyd appealed tearfully, "can't you say anything at all?" "Nothing to be said," interpolated Blunt. "She's doing the right thing. I'll stand by her through thick and thin." Flora held out her hand to him. "Thank you, Major Blunt," she said. "Mademoiselle," said Poirot, "will you let an old man congratulate you on your courage and your loyalty? And will you not misunderstand me if I ask you most solemnly, to postpone the announcement you speak of for at least 2 days more?" Flora hesitated. "I ask it in Ralph Peyton's interests as much as in yours, mademoiselle." You frown. You do not see how that can be, but I assure you that it is so. Pas de blague. You put the case into my hands. You must not hamper me now." Flora paused a few minutes before replying. "I do not like it," she said at last, "but I will do what you say." She sat down again at the table. "And now, messieurs and mesdames," said Poirot rapidly, "I will continue with what I was about to say. Understand this, I mean to arrive at the truth. The truth, however ugly in itself, is always curious and beautiful to the seeker after it. I am much aged. My powers may not be what they were." Here he clearly expected a contradiction. "In all probability this is the last case I shall ever investigate. But Hercule Poirot does not end with a failure. Messieurs and mesdames, I tell you, I mean to know, and I shall know, in spite of you all." He brought out the last words provocatively, hurling them in our face as it were. I think we all flinched back a little, excepting Geoffrey Raymond, who remained good-humored and imperturbable as usual. "How do you mean, in spite of us all?" he asked, with slightly raised eyebrows. "But just that, monsieur. Every one of you in this room is concealing something from me." He raised his hand as a faint murmur of protest arose. Yes, I know what I'm saying. It may be something unimportant, trivial, which is supposed to have no bearing on a case, but there it is. Each one of you has something to hide. Come now, am I right?" His glance, challenging and accusing, swept round the table, and every pair of eyes dropped before his. "Yes, mine as well." "I am answered," said Poirot, with a curious laugh. He got up from his seat. "I appeal to you all. Tell me the truth, the whole truth." There was a silence. "Will no one speak?" He gave the same short laugh again. "C'est dommage," he said, and went out. Chapter 13. The Goose Quill. That evening, at Poirot's request, I went over to his house after dinner. Caroline saw me depart with visible reluctance. I think she would have liked to have accompanied me. Poirot greeted me hospitably. He had placed a bottle of Irish whiskey on a small table with a soda-water siphon and a glass. He himself was engaged in brewing hot chocolate. It was a favorite beverage of his, I discovered later. He inquired politely after my sister, whom he declared to be a most interesting woman. "I'm afraid you've been giving her a swelled head," I said dryly. "What about Sunday afternoon?" He laughed and twinkled. "I always like to employ the expert," he remarked obscurely, but he refused to explain the remark. "You got all the local gossip anyway," I remarked. "True and untrue." "And a great deal of valuable information," he added quietly. "Such as?" He shook his head. Why not have told me the truth? He countered. In a place like this, all Ralph Peyton's doings were bound to be known. If your sister had not happened to pass through the wood that day, somebody else would have done so. I suppose they would, I said grumpily. What about this interest of yours in my patients? Again he twinkled. Only one of them, Doctor. Only one of them. The last, I hazarded. I find Miss Russell a study of the most interesting, he said evasively. Do you agree with my sister and Mrs. Ackroyd that there is something fishy about her? I asked. Eh? What do you say? Fishy? I explained to the best of my ability. And they say that, do they? Didn't my sister convey as much to you yesterday afternoon? C'est possible. For no reason whatever, I declared. Les femmes, generalized Poirot. They are marvelous. They invent haphazard, and by miracle they are right. Not that it is that, really. Women observe subconsciously 1,000 little details without knowing that they are doing so. Their subconscious mind adds these little things together, and they call the result intuition. Me, I am very skilled in psychology. I know these things. He swelled his chest out importantly, looking so ridiculous that I found it difficult not to burst out laughing. Then he took a small sip of his chocolate and carefully wiped his moustache. I wish you'd tell me, I burst out, what you really think of it all. He put down his cup. You wish that? I do. You have seen what I have seen. Should not our ideas be the same? I'm afraid you're laughing at me, I said stiffly. Of course, I have no experience of matters of this kind. Poirot smiled at me indulgently. You are like a little child who wants to know the way the engine works. You wish to see the affair, not as the family doctor sees it, but with the eye of a detective who knows and cares for no one, to whom they are all strangers and all equally liable to suspicion. You put it very well, I said. So I give you then a little lecture. The first thing is to get a clear history of what happened that evening. Always bear in mind that the person who speaks may be lying. I raised my eyebrows. Rather a suspicious attitude. But necessary, I assure you, necessary. Now first, Dr. Sheppard leaves the house at 10 minutes to 9. How do I know that? Because I told you so. But you might not be speaking the truth, or the watch you went by might be wrong. But Parker also says that you left the house at 10 minutes to 9. So we accept that statement and pass on. At 9 o'clock you run into a man, and here we come to what we will call the romance of the mysterious stranger, just outside the park gates. How do I know that that is so? I told you so, I began again, but Poirot interrupted me with a gesture of impatience. Ah, but it is that you are a little stupid tonight, my friend. You know that it is so, but how am I to know? Eh bien, I am able to tell you that the mysterious stranger was not a hallucination on your part, because the maid of a Miss Gannett met him a few minutes before you did, and of her, too, he inquired the way to Fernly Park. We accept his presence, therefore, and we can be fairly sure of two things about him, that he was a stranger to the neighborhood, and that whatever his object in going to Fernley, there was no great secrecy about it, since he twice asked the way there. Yes, I said, I see that. Now I have made it my business to find out more about this man. He had a drink at the Three Boars, I learned, and the barmaid there says that he spoke with an American accent and mentioned having just come over from the States. Did it strike you that he had an American accent? Yes, I think he had, I said, after a minute or two, during which I cast my mind back, but a very slight one. Précisément. There is also this which, you will remember, I picked up in the summer house. He held out to me the little quill. I looked at it curiously. Then a memory of something I had read stirred in me. Poirot, who had been watching my face, nodded. Yes, heroin snow. Drug takers carry it like this, and stiffen up the nose. Diamorphine hydrochloride, I murmured mechanically. This method of taking the drug is very common on the other side. Another proof, if we wanted one, that the man came from Canada or the States. What first attracted your attention to that summer house? I asked curiously. My friend the inspector took it for granted that anyone using that path did so as a shortcut to the house. But as soon as I saw the summer house, I realized that the same path would be taken by anyone using the summer house as a rendezvous. Now, it seems fairly certain that the stranger came neither to the front nor to the back door. Then did someone from the house go out and meet him? If so, what could be a more convenient place than that little summer house? I searched it with the hope that I might find some clue inside. I found two, the scrap of cambric and the quill. And a scrap of cambric? I asked curiously. What about that? Poirot raised his eyebrows. You do not use your little grey cells, he remarked dryly. The scrap of starch cambric should be obvious. Not very obvious to me. I changed the subject. Anyway, I said, this man went to the summer house to meet somebody. Who was that somebody? Exactly the question, said Poirot. You will remember that Mrs. Ackroyd and her daughter came over from Canada to live here. Is that what you meant today when you accused them of hiding the truth? Perhaps. Now another point. What did you think of the parlour-maid's story? What story? The story of her dismissal. Does it take half an hour to dismiss a servant? Was the story of those important papers a likely one? And remember, though she says she was in her bedroom from 9:30 until 10 o'clock, there is no one to confirm her statement. You bewilder me, I said. To me it rose clearer. But tell me now your own ideas and theories. I drew a piece of paper from my pocket. I just scribbled down a few suggestions, I said apologetically. But excellent. You have method. Let us hear them. I read out in a somewhat embarrassed voice. To begin with, one must look at the thing logically. Just what my poor Hastings used to say, interrupted Poirot. But alas, he never did so. Point number 1. Mr. Ackroyd was heard talking to someone at 9:30. Point number 2. At some time during the evening, Ralph Peyton must have come in through the window, as evidenced by the prints of his shoes. Point number 3. Mr. Ackroyd was nervous that evening, and would only have admitted someone he knew. Point number 4. The person with Mr. Ackroyd at 9:30 was asking for money. We know Ralph Peyton was in a scrape. These 4 points go to show that the person with Mr. Ackroyd at 9:30 was Ralph Peyton, but we know that Mr. Ackroyd was alive at 9:45. Therefore, it was not Ralph who killed him. Ralph left the window open. Afterwards, the murderer came in that way. And who was the murderer? Inquired Poirot. The American stranger. He may have been in league with Parker, and possibly in Parker we have the man who blackmailed Mrs. Ferrars. If so, Parker may have heard enough to realize the game was up, have told his accomplice so, and the latter did the crime with the dagger which Parker gave him. It is a theory, that, admitted Poirot. Decidedly you have cells of a kind, but it leaves a good deal unaccounted for. Such as? The telephone call, the pushed-out chair. Do you really think the latter important? I interrupted. Perhaps not, admitted my friend. It may have been pulled out by accident, and Raymond or Blunt may have shoved it into place unconsciously under the stress of emotion. Then there is the missing £40, given by Ackroyd to Ralph, I suggested. He may have reconsidered his first refusal. That still leaves one thing unexplained. What? Why was Blunt so certain in his own mind that it was Raymond with Mr. Ackroyd at 9:30? He explained that, I said. You think so? I will not press the point. Tell me instead, what were Ralph Peyton's reasons for disappearing? That's rather more difficult, I said slowly. I should have to speak as a medical man. Ralph's nerves must have gone fud. If he suddenly found out that his uncle had been murdered within a few minutes of his leaving him, after, perhaps, a rather stormy interview, well, he might get the wind up and clear right out. Men have been known to do that, act guiltily when they're perfectly innocent. Yes, that is true, said Poirot, but we must not lose sight of one thing. I know what you're going to say, I remarked. Motive. Ralph Peyton inherits a great fortune by his uncle's death. That is one motive, agreed Poirot. One? Mais oui. Do you realize that there are 3 separate motives staring us in the face? Somebody certainly stole the blue envelope and its contents. That is one motive. Blackmail. Ralph Peyton may have been the man who blackmailed Mrs. Ferrars. Remember, as far as Hammond knew, Ralph Peyton had not applied to his uncle for help of late. That looks as though he were being supplied with money elsewhere. Then there is the fact that he was in some, scrape, which he feared might get to his uncle's ears. And finally, there is the one you have just mentioned. Dear me, I said, rather taken aback. The case does seem black against him. Does it? Said Poirot. That is where we disagree, you and I. 3 motives. It is almost too much. I am inclined to believe that, after all, Ralph Peyton is innocent. Chapter 14. Mrs. Ackroyd. After the evening talk I have just chronicled, the affair seemed to me to enter on a different phase. The whole thing can be divided into 2 parts, each clear and distinct from the other. Part 1 ranges from Ackroyd's death on a Friday evening to the following Monday night. It is the straightforward narrative of what occurred as presented to Hercule Poirot. I was at Poirot's elbow the whole time. I saw what he saw. I tried my best to read his mind. As I know now, I failed in this latter task, though Poirot showed me all his discoveries, as, for instance, the gold wedding ring. He held back the vital and yet logical impressions that he formed. As I came to know later, this secrecy was characteristic of him. He would throw out hints and suggestions, but beyond that he would not go. As I say, up till the morning evening, my narrative might have been that of Poirot himself. I played Watson to his Sherlock, but after Monday our ways diverged. Poirot was busy on his own account. I got to hear of what he was doing, because in King's Abbot you get to hear of everything. But he did not take me into his confidence beforehand, and I, too, had my own preoccupations. On looking back, the thing that strikes me most is the piecemeal character of this period. Everyone had a hand in the elucidation of the mystery. It was rather like a jigsaw puzzle to which everyone contributed their own little piece of knowledge or discovery, but their task ended there. To Poirot alone belongs the renown of fitting those pieces into their correct place. Some of the incidents seemed at the time irrelevant and unmeaning. There was, for instance, the question of the black roots, but that comes later. To take things strictly in chronological order, I must begin with the summons from Mrs. Ackroyd. She sent for me early on Tuesday morning, and since the summons sounded an urgent one, I hastened there, expecting to find her in extremis. The lady was in bed. So much did she concede to the etiquette of the situation. She gave me her bony hand and indicated a chair drawn up to the bedside. "Well, Mrs. Ackroyd," I said, "and what's the matter with you?" I spoke with that kind of spurious geniality which seems to be expected of general practitioners. "I'm prostrated," said Mrs. Ackroyd in a faint voice. "Absolutely prostrated. It's the shock of poor Roger's death. They say these things often aren't felt at that time, you know. It's the reaction afterwards. It is a pity that a doctor is precluded by his profession from being able sometimes to say what he really thinks. I would have given anything to be able to answer bunkum. Instead, I suggested a tonic. Mrs. Ackroyd accepted the tonic. One move in the game seemed now to be concluded. Not for a moment did I imagine that I had been sent for because of the shock occasioned by Ackroyd's death. But Mrs. Ackroyd is totally incapable of pursuing a straightforward course on any subject. She always approaches her object by tortuous means. I wondered very much why it was she had sent for me. "And then that scene yesterday," continued my patient. She paused as though expecting me to take up a cue. "What scene?" "Doctor, how can you? Have you forgotten? That dreadful little Frenchman, or Belgian, or whatever he is, bullying us all like he did. It has quite upset me, coming on top of Roger's death." "I'm very sorry, Mrs. Ackroyd," I said. "I don't know what he meant, shouting at us like he did. I should hope I know my duty too well to dream of concealing anything. I have given the police every assistance in my power." Mrs. Ackroyd paused, and I said, "Quite so." I was beginning to have a glimmering of what all the trouble was about. "No one can say that I have failed in my duty," continued Mrs. Ackroyd. "I am sure Inspector Raglan is perfectly satisfied. Why should this little upstart of a foreigner make a fuss? A most ridiculous-looking creature he is, too, just like a comic Frenchman in a review. I can't think why Flora insisted on bringing him into the case. She never said a word to me about it. Just went off and did it on her own. Flora is too independent. I'm a woman of the world and her mother. She should have come to me for advice first. I listened to all this in silence. What does he think? That's what I want to know. Does he actually imagine I'm hiding something? He possibly accused me yesterday. I shrugged my shoulders. It is surely of no consequence, Mrs. Ackroyd, I said, since you are not concealing anything. Any remarks he may have made do not apply to you. Mrs. Ackroyd went off at a tangent, after her usual fashion. Servants are so tiresome, she said. They gossip and talk amongst themselves, and then it gets round, and all the time there's probably nothing in it at all. Have the servants been talking? I asked. What about? Mrs. Ackroyd cast a very shrewd glance at me. It quite threw me off my balance. I was sure you'd know, Doctor, if anyone did. You were with Monsieur Poirot all the time, weren't you? I was. Then of course you know. It was that girl, Ursula Bourne, wasn't it? Naturally, she's leaving. She would want to make all the trouble she could. Spiteful, that's what they are. They're all alike. Now, you being there, Doctor, you must know exactly what she did say. I'm most anxious that no wrong impression should get about. After all, you don't repeat every little detail to the police, do you? There are family matters sometimes, nothing to do with the question of the murder. But if the girl was spiteful, she may have made out all sorts of things. I was shrewd enough to see that a very real anxiety lay behind these outpourings. Poirot had been justified in his premises. Of the 6 people round the table yesterday, Mrs. Ackroyd at least had something to hide. It was for me to discover what that something might be. If I were you, Mrs. Ackroyd, I said brusquely, I should make a clean breast of things. She gave a little scream. Oh, Doctor, how can you be so abrupt? It sounds as though, and I can explain everything so simply. Then why not do so? I suggested. Mrs. Ackroyd took out a frilled handkerchief and became tearful. I thought, Doctor, that you might put it to Monsieur Poirot. Explain it, you know, because it's so difficult for a foreigner to see our point of view. And you don't know, nobody could know, what I've had to contend with. A martyrdom, a long martyrdom. That's what my life has been. I don't like to speak ill of the dead, but there it is. Not the smallest spill, but it had all to be gone over. Just as though Roger had a few miserly hundreds a year, instead of being one of the wealthiest men in these parts. Mrs. Ackroyd paused to dab her eyes with the frilled handkerchief. Yes, I said encouragingly. You were talking about bills. Those dreadful bills, and some I didn't like to show Roger at all. They were things a man wouldn't understand. He would have said the things weren't necessary. And of course they mounted up, you know, and they kept coming in. She looked at me appealingly, as though asking me to condole with her on this striking peculiarity. It's a habit they have, I agreed. And the tone altered, became quite abusive. I assure you, Doctor, I was becoming a nervous wreck. I couldn't sleep at nights, and a dreadful fluttering round the heart. And then I got a letter from a Scotch gentleman. As a matter of fact, there were 2 letters, both Scotch gentlemen. Mr. Bruce Macpherson was one, and the other was Colin MacDonald. Quite a coincidence. Hardly that, I said dryly. They are usually Scotch gentlemen, but I suspect a Semitic strain in their ancestry. £10 to 10,000 on notes of hand alone, murmured Mrs. Ackroyd reminiscently. I wrote to one of them, but it seemed there were difficulties. She paused. I gathered that we were just coming to delicate ground. I have never known anyone more difficult to bring to the point. You see, murmured Mrs. Ackroyd, it's all a question of expectations, isn't it? Testamentary expectations. And though, of course, I expected that Roger would provide for me, I didn't know. I thought that if only I could glance over a copy of his will, not in any sense of vulgar prying, but just so that I could make my own arrangements. She glanced sideways at me. The position was now very delicate indeed. Fortunately, words, ingeniously used, will serve to mask the ugliness of naked facts. I could only tell this to you, dear Dr. Sheppard, said Mrs. Ackroyd rapidly. I can trust you not to misjudge me, and to represent the matter in the right light to Mr. Poirot. It was on Friday afternoon." She came to a stop and swallowed uncertainly. "Yes," I repeated encouragingly. "On Friday afternoon. Well?" Everyone was out, or so I thought, and I went into Roger's study. I had some real reason for going there. I mean, there was nothing underhand about it. And as I saw all the papers heaped on the desk, it just came to me, like a flash. I wonder if Roger keeps his will in one of the drawers of the desk. I'm so impulsive, always was, from a child. I do things on a spur of the moment. He'd left his keys, very careless of him, in the lock of the top drawer. "I see," I said helpfully. "So you searched the desk. Did you find the will?" Mrs. Ackroyd gave a little scream, and I realized that I had not been sufficiently diplomatic. "How dreadful it sounds! But it wasn't at all like that, really." "Of course it wasn't," I said hastily. "You must forgive my unfortunate way of putting things. You see, men are so peculiar. In dear Roger's place, I should not have objected to revealing the provisions of my will, but men are so secretive. One is forced to adopt little subterfuges in self-defense." "And the result of the little subterfuge?" I asked. "That's just what I'm telling you. As I got to the bottom drawer, Bourne came in. Most awkward. Of course, I shut the drawer and stood up, and I called her attention to a few specks of dust on the surface. But I didn't like the way she looked. Quite respectful in manner, but a very nasty light in her eyes. Almost contemptuous, if you know what I mean. I never have liked the girl very much. She's a good servant, and she says ma'am, and doesn't object to wearing caps and aprons. And she can say not at home without scruples if she has to answer the door instead of Parker. And she doesn't have those peculiar gurgling noises inside which so many parlour-maids seem to have when they wait at table. Let me see, where was I? You were saying that in spite of several valuable qualities, you never liked Bourne. No more I do. She's odd. There's something different about her from the others. Too well educated, that's my opinion. You can't tell who are ladies and who aren't nowadays." "And what happened next?" I asked. "Nothing. At least, Roger came in, and I thought he was out for a walk. And he said, 'What's all this?' And I said, 'Nothing. I just came in to fetch Punch.' And I took Punch and went out with it. Bourne stayed behind. I heard her asking Roger if she could speak to him for a minute. I went straight up to my room to lie down. I was very upset." There was a pause. "You will explain to Mr. Poirot, won't you? You can see for yourself what a trivial matter the whole thing was. But of course, when he was so stern about concealing things, I thought of this at once. Bourne may have made some extraordinary story out of it, but you can explain, can't you?" "That is all?" I said. "You have told me everything." "Yes," said Mrs. Ackroyd. "Oh, yes," she added firmly. But I had noted the momentary hesitation, and I knew that there was still something she was keeping back. It was nothing less than a flash of sheer genius that prompted me to ask the question I did. "Mrs. Ackroyd," I said, "was it you who left the silver table open?" I had my answer in the blush of guilt that even rouge and powder could not conceal. "How did you know?" she whispered. "It was you, then?" "Yes, you see, there were 1 or 2 pieces of old silver, very interesting. I had been reading up the subject, and there was an illustration of quite a small piece which had fetched an immense sum at Christie's. It looked to me just the same as the one in the silver table. I thought I would take it up to London with me when I went, and have it valued. Then if it really was a valuable piece, just think what a charming surprise it would have been for Roger." I refrained from comments, accepting Mrs. Ackroyd's story on its merits. I even forbore to ask her why it was necessary to abstract what she wanted in such a surreptitious manner. "Why did you leave the lid open?" I asked. "Did you forget?" "I was startled," said Mrs. Ackroyd. "I heard footsteps coming along the terrace outside. I hastened out of the room and just got up the stairs before Parker opened the front door to you." "That must have been Miss Russell," I said thoughtfully. Mrs. Ackroyd had revealed to me one fact that was extremely interesting. Whether her designs upon Ackroyd silver had been strictly honourable, I neither knew nor cared. What did interest me was the fact that Miss Russell must have entered the drawing-room by the window, and that I had not been wrong when I judged her to be out of breath with running. Where had she been? I thought of the summer house and a scrap of cambric. I wonder if Miss Russell has her handkerchiefs starched, I exclaimed on the spur of the moment. Mrs. Ackroyd's start recalled me to myself, and I rose. You think you can explain to Mr. Poirot? She asked anxiously. Oh, certainly, absolutely. I got away at last, after being forced to listen to more justifications of her conduct. The parlour-maid was in the hall, and it was she who helped me on with my overcoat. I observed her more closely than I had done heretofore. It was clear that she had been crying. How is it, I asked, that you told us that Mr. Ackroyd sent for you on Friday to his study? I hear now that it was you who asked to speak to him. For a minute that girl's eyes dropped before mine. Then she spoke. I meant to leave in any case, she said uncertainly. I said no more. She opened the front door for me. Just as I was passing out, she said suddenly in a low voice, Excuse me, sir. Is there any news of Captain Peyton? I shook my head, looking at her inquiringly. He ought to come back, she said. Indeed, he ought to come back. She was looking at me with appealing eyes. Does no one know where he is? She asked. Do you? I said sharply. She shook her head. No, indeed, I know nothing. But anyone who was a friend to him would tell him this. He ought to come back. I lingered, thinking that perhaps the girl would say more. Her next question surprised me. When do they think the murder was done? Just before 10 o'clock? That is the idea, I said. Between 10:15 and the hour. Not earlier? Not before 10:15? I looked at her attentively. She was so clearly eager for a reply in the affirmative. That's out of the question, I said. Miss Ackroyd saw her uncle alive at 10:15. She turned away, and her whole figure seemed to droop. A handsome girl, I said to myself as I drove off. An exceedingly handsome girl. Caroline was at home. She had had a visit from Poirot and was very pleased and important about it. I am helping him with the case, she explained. I felt rather uneasy. Caroline is bad enough as it is. What will she be like with her detective instincts encouraged? Are you going round the neighborhood looking for Ralph Peyton's mysterious girl? I inquired. I might do that on my own account, said Caroline. No, this is a special thing Mr. Poirot wants me to find out for him. What is it? I asked. He wants to know whether Ralph Peyton's boots were black or brown, said Caroline with tremendous solemnity. I stared at her. I see now that I was unbelievably stupid about these boots. I failed altogether to grasp the point. They were brown shoes, I said. I saw them. Not shoes, James. Boots. Mr. Poirot wants to know whether a pair of boots Ralph had with him at the hotel were brown or black. A lot hangs on it. Call me dense if you like. I didn't see. And how are you going to find out? I asked. Caroline said there would be no difficulty about that. Our Annie's dearest friend was Miss Gannet's maid, Clara, and Clara was walking out with the boots at the Three Boars. The whole thing was simplicity itself, and by the aid of Miss Gannet, who cooperated loyally, at once giving Clara leave of absence, the matter was rushed through at express speed. It was when we were sitting down to lunch that Caroline remarked, with would-be unconcern, about those boots of Ralph Peyton's. Well, I said, what about them? Mr. Poirot thought they were probably brown. He was wrong. They're black. And Caroline nodded her head several times. She evidently felt that she had scored a point over Poirot. I did not answer. I was puzzling over what the color of a pair of Ralph Peyton's boots had to do with the case.